Bills Mafia. On tonight's Air Raid Hour, Dave and I will be power ranking the top 10 quarterbacks in the National Football League. Where does Josh Allen rank? Who will prove to be his closest competition? We dive into all those questions and more. But first,
welcome to the Air Raid Hour, a Cover One Network podcast. Here are your hosts, Judge Mathis and Tilt Money.
welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the Air Raid Hour, brought to you by the Cover One Sports Network. Tonight, we're continuing sort of our power ranking series. We're going to talk about our top 10 quarterbacks in the National Football League, try to get a gauge of where Josh Allen ranks amongst the NFL elites. But we're going to do things a little bit differently tonight. Instead of Dave and I combining our lists in sort of a snake draft style, I'll be presenting my top 10. Dave will be concurrently presenting his top 10, and we'll have a brief discussion whenever we have some major differences, and we'll talk about why we slot guys, where we slot guys. So we're going to have a little bit of fun with that tonight, I think, Dave.
Yeah, and I mean, look, this was hard. I mean, I will say compared to doing the top 10 Bills under 25, this was a lot harder to do.
I just know, like, I'm gonna post this list on social media, and I'm gonna have certain fan bases crawling up my rear end about leaving their guy off. But really,
Same.
it's a difficult way to measure. And I think for me, the criteria, age, contract, etc., I didn't take any of that into account, really. I was just trying to articulate who were going to be the best 10 quarterbacks in 2024. And that means things like who are their coaches, who's calling the play. I take supporting cast into account as well. So all of those things I personally took into account sort of as I stacked my board here for the top 10. And that meant that some guys were left out who might have been deserving if you are, maybe your criteria is different than sort of the criteria that I utilized.
Yeah, I mean, I think the criteria is always a bit these whole things are always a little bit subjective, right? Because you can kind of spin the narrative however you want, using stats, using whatever. For me, I also still incorporated like talent level as I see it, even if maybe the supporting cast wasn't quite as good. I still factored that in, and you'll probably see that kind of maybe towards the bottom of my top 10. But also, I also maybe left some guys out who I thought stats were inflated a bit versus what I feel of them as a quarterback. So for me, it wasn't all about stats. I like a lot of the things you mentioned, I took into account: supporting cast, coaching staff, the relationship between the head coach or the coordinator and the quarterback, the history between the coordinator and the quarterback, and past success, maybe determining how their success may be in 2024 as well. So yeah, it's all a subjective thing. It's fun. And there will be some differences, and that's what's fun to talk about at this time of year.
All right. I think we can both agree QB1 on both of our lists is going to be Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, he's number one for me. I mean, look, we all want to put Josh number one, but I just don't think you can argue with the 3 rings. The combination of him and Andy Reid has been magical. They always find a way in the postseason to get it done. You know, you can be mad about it. We are mad about it, but they've just found a way, right? And for some of the same reasons that we were going to write Kansas City off a few years ago because of the receiving room was depleted. No Tyreek. Tyreek was gone. There's some parallels to be drawn to that Chiefs team, to this upcoming Bills team after losing Stephon Diggs. So Pat Mahomes, number one.
I mean, this is interesting too, right? I kept thinking to myself, because it's like, oh, Patrick Mahomes, number one, that's chalk, move on. But I wanted to go back to it. I just wanted to think to myself, like, what is Josh Allen going to have to do to even get into the conversation? And my mind immediately went to Josh Allen's got to win 2 Super Bowls before Mahomes wins his next one to even be in the conversation, in my opinion. I think number one is just going to be chalk for like at least the next 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's some parallels here to Manning and Brady, right? I think there was an argument in the Manning-Brady era of those battles that a lot of people still thought maybe at that time that Peyton Manning was the better quarterback of the two, but Brady had the rings. And then over the course of time, obviously Manning got his 2 rings. Brady, insurmountable amount of rings to kind of catch up to, right? As far as like that debate
Mhm.
kind of went on, Brady is the GOAT. But there are still some people who probably think maybe Peyton Manning was the better overall quarterback. So those debates are fun during that time. I think maybe a similar situation here. I don't necessarily think that you can pick a wrong answer here, but you
Mhm.
can't really ignore the fact that Patrick Mahomes has led his team to 3 Super Bowls. And I know wins aren't a quarterback stat, but he is
Yeah.
obviously a huge reason they've won 3 Super Bowls. So
Yeah, it's not like Trent Dilfer, like,
yeah,
riding the Baltimore Ravens defense to a Super Bowl.
exactly.
Number 2, I had Josh Allen. I know that some fan bases will call us homers, but I had Josh Allen as my number 2.
Josh Allen's number 2, most touchdowns in the league, right? Since 2019. Four straight seasons of 40
Yeah,
plus, if I'm not mistaken, 40 plus TDs.
you can't argue with
Probably
that
got,
production. He is the Bills' offense.
I mean, absolutely probably snubbed from multiple
Mhm.
MVP awards. Like it is
Yeah.
wild to me, like the production this guy's put up
Mhm.
and the combination of the arm, the running, coming into a situation where, yes, the Bills broke the playoff drought in 2017 with Tyrod. I get that. But the reality is this was a losing franchise for 20 years. It is not an easy place to come in
Mhm.
and all of a sudden now have this extremely quick turnaround of sustained success and now incredible expectation. And he has delivered, um, for this team, 4 straight division titles, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah, it,
I
it's yeah, it's incredible.
He's definitely, I think, the most special quarterback in the National Football League. At the end of the day, when you just see some of the freakish things that he does on the football field, I think even Patrick Mahomes would be like, "Yeah, dude's a freak." Like I think even the best in the game, our number one, would sort of admit that Josh Allen can maybe do some things that he cannot. And if you look at Josh, I mean, it's not his fault that his defense has let him down in every postseason, as well as having to go through the juggernaut that is Kansas City because he's in the AFC East and not maybe the NFC. So he has those things stacked against him as well. You mentioned the hardware. When we get to Lamar, we're probably going to have a conversation about, well, where do MVPs mean nothing? Well, Lamar Jackson's 2023 MVP means absolutely nothing. And we'll get to that whenever we get to Lamar Jackson on our list here. But number 3, I had Joe Burrow. Who did you have as your number 3 quarterback?
I also had Joe Burrow. I mean, I know he was hurt last year, but
Mhm,
2021 over 4,600 passing yards, over 70% completion percentage, 34 TDs. 2023 followed it up with another 35 TD season.
mhm,
Again, 68% completion percentage. He's only going into his 5th year, but he absolutely, we talk about the Bills being a tough team to go into and turn some of the fortunes around. Like the Bengals, yes, they had some success with Andy Dalton, but they never had playoff success. And I know there
mhm,
hasn't been a ton of playoff success for the Bengals, but there is something about Joe Burrow. He has an it factor. He has something in him. When you look at him, you're like, that's the dude that I want to lead my franchise. That is
mhm.
one of very few list of dudes that I would want to lead my
Yeah.
franchise. And when you're the number 1 overall pick, that's a lot of pressure. A lot
Mhm,
of people said, "Oh, it was the receivers he had at LC, blah blah blah." Like, yes, I know he's got Jamar Chase and like T Higgins and like all this stuff, but like he
mhm.
was getting beat up that first year and that second year behind that offensive line. And he's a tough dude. He's battled through some injuries, but I really am a big fan of Joe Burrow, and that's why I put him number 3.
The most swag, I think, of any quarterback in the National Football League. He slayed the dragon, right? He went into Arrowhead and he beat the Chiefs and he got himself to the Super Bowl. I mean, he got to the top of the mountain and sort of fell off, losing to the Rams. He couldn't sort of complete the climb, but been there, done that in Arrowhead. I think he's the most accurate quarterback in the National League. I mean, or National Football League. When you think of precision passers, I think of Joe Burrow. not to mention all the weapons he has to keep accumulating the stats that he does. He's got Jamar Chase for now. He's got T. Higgins. I think Zach Moss and Chase Brown is actually an upgrade over an aging Joe Mixon. I think if Jermaine Burton can stay on the football field because that he's got those character issues, like low key, he could be like the guy where it's like, whoa, well, producing like that as a rookie. So that could be a guy. They added a ton of competition at tight end. Any one of those guys, whether it's Eric All or Mike Gesicki, could be the beneficiary of Joe Burrow in that offense. They've got a solid offensive line, offensive play caller. So I think everything for me is just in Joe Burrow's favor. I feel pretty confident putting him at number 3. That leads to number 4. I have Lamar Jackson at number 4. Who did you place at number 4?
Yeah, we're the same so far. I also had Lamar Jackson at number 4. I was kind of going back and forth between Lamar and Burrow, right? And who to put at 3, who to put at 4. But ultimately, I went with Burrow at 3, Lamar at 4. Obviously, the multiple MVPs, I get that. Last year's a little bit of a head scratcher, right? It almost felt like by default, but absolutely electric runner. He's like, I think Josh Allen is a better. I don't know how to describe it. Like Lamar Jackson's obviously faster than Josh Allen, and he's twitchier, and he's got the yards, and he's got like that sort of. When you think of Lamar Jackson, you think dual threat, and you almost think of his running first before you think of his passing. But with Josh Allen, and why he's higher for me, is you do think of Josh Allen's passing probably more, if not equal to his running. Lamar, you think of his running more, but he's still a good passer. He's never really had great weapons to throw to. He's had Mark Andrews. Now he has Zay Flowers. He had Odell last year. Bateman, we'll see. But the playoff success for him hasn't been there, right? And I think that's what probably puts him down a little bit lower for me. He's been to a lot of playoff games, hasn't won a ton of playoff games, but I do think the combination of him and John Harbaugh, he stuck his neck out, benched Joe Flacco, went with Lamar Jackson. A lot of people didn't think Lamar could succeed in the NFL, and he has. And I am a big fan of Lamar Jackson. I like him a lot. So clearly number 4, it's no disrespect. He's number 4 on the list. So a big fan.
And the thing about a couple of things here that I think of when we talk about Lamar Jackson, number 1, nobody talks about the Baltimore Ravens being a team in transition like they do the Buffalo Bills being a team in transition, which sort of shocks me, right? I get that they were in the AFC Championship game last year and we weren't, but at the same time, like, come on, that team is overhauling their roster just as much as the Buffalo Bills are overhauling their roster. Why aren't we having the same narratives and the same conversations in the national media that they are about the Buffalo Bills? It's one pet peeve. Second pet peeve when I think of Lamar Jackson is the 2023 MVP award that he won. And I'm not mad at Lamar for winning the award. As you mentioned, I think the perfect way of saying it is he won by default. He was on a really good team. He had a really sort of showcase game, that 5-touchdown game against San Francisco at the end of the season that sort of just sealed it for him. But statistically, he's probably the least deserving MVP in the history of MVPs.
Yeah, he could be.
Statistically, Josh Allen should have been the MVP. If I were Roger Goodell, I would have just not given anyone the award that year, or B, just given it to Christian McCaffrey, because I didn't think even Josh Allen, statistically he was the best, but was he the most deserving too? I'm not even sitting here telling you Josh Allen was the most deserving. He was more deserving than Lamar, but I can't sit here and tell you he was the most deserving either.
I don't think a quarterback should have won. I think it should have either been McCaffrey or Tyreek. Personally, I mean, that's I would have been fine with either of them.
I mean, so either way, I don't really want to give him that hardware as sort of a part of that resume for ranking him at number 4. I just sort of put an asterisk next to that MVP for him, especially when you go and you see some of the people who vote for the MVP. Chris Sims has an MVP vote. Emmanuel Aiko has an MVP vote. So whether it's All Pro or it's MVP, a lot of these awards are just losing their meaning because the people who are voting for the winners of these awards, we mentioned this on Monday's show with Terrell Bernard, just don't know what they're watching. Yeah, they don't.
And I think agents are going to have to start maybe rethinking how they put these types of incentives in the contracts they negotiate with GMs, because guys are losing out potentially on incentive earnings by getting snubbed by these voters.
It's hurting Hall of Fame resumes too, sadly. Like, I hate to say
Yeah.
it, but I think it is. It's pretty bad. Number 5 on my list. I want CJ Stroud. Who did you have as number 5 on your list?
I love CJ Stroud.
Mhm,
I mean, I'm actually a little surprised that we have the same top 5. I guess it shouldn't be too much of a
mhm,
surprise. I wouldn't say it's chalk, but it's close. I look, CJ Stroud was my fantasy quarterback last year. He's got weapons galore. That combination of him and D'Amico Ryans, who's a defensive head coach, by the way,
mhm.
but Nico Collins, Tank Dell, um, I mean, they have surrounded CJ Stroud with weaponry, and clearly the Texans overachieved
Mhm.
last year. But I also don't think they were a 1-year wonder last year. I think they're here to stay.
Yep.
Head coaching makes a huge difference. Obviously, the quarterback makes a huge difference. He carries himself in a way that you can just root for this guy and get behind him. Like, I really love watching CJ Stroud play, and I hate that the Texans are now yet another, hurdle in the way of the Bills in the AFC, but, like, I find myself liking the Texans because I like
Mhm.
CJ Stroud so much. So,
Yeah.
obviously, hopefully he can build on what he did last year. I know you got him in our sleeper dynasty league for the cover one. I really debated taking him.
I
Uh,
think were you before me or after me?
I was one. I took Lamar one before
Yeah.
you, and you took Stroud. So there we go, 4 and 5, and that's how they shake
Mhm.
out here. But man, Stroud
Yeah.
is legit.
Yeah, you mentioned impressive rookie season, all those weapons, whether it's Mixon that they added, it's Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz. I mean, even beyond that, you got Brevin Jordan, Noah Brown, John Mechie, just an embarrassment of riches there for CJ
Yeah,
Stroud, Bobby Slowick, a guy who turned down head coaching interviews and jobs this offseason. Just a really impressive the turnaround in Houston. I think CJ Stroud is going to break out. I wouldn't be surprised if CJ Stroud wins the NFL MVP this year because I think the
wouldn't be
narrative's going to be
surprised.
behind him. I mean, it's just fun to watch how this dude carries himself. I mean, he has clearly won over, the hearts and minds of a lot of people, national pundits, fans alike. So I think a lot of the popular support is going to go to CJ Stroud, and he's going to put up the numbers. And we just had that conversation of where this award is going and the type of people who vote for the award now.
It's
So
just, I mean, Diggs, Collins, Dell. I don't know that there's a better three
filthy.
wide receiver combination in the. I think
And
that's the best three wide
I've
receiver combination in the NFL.
I've never understood why teams like Miami and teams like Philadelphia, why aren't you twisting the knife? Why aren't you adding that third wide receiver to go with Hill and Waddle? Why aren't you adding that third receiver to go with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith? Like it's just like a rotating cast of rejects in the slot for Miami and Philadelphia. And then San Francisco, I think, unless they trade Debo, San Francisco finally did it. San Francisco's got Ayuk, they got Debo, they got Kittle,
Here.
they got McCaffrey. What do they add? Ricky Pearsall.
Yep.
And then they go and they add Jacob Cowing late and Isaac Garendo. Like they're just like boom, 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 boom. Like we're just gonna add all the weapons for Brock Purdy. I'm honestly surprised teams like Miami, teams like Philly haven't caught on and just gone for the absolute jugular. It's gonna be really interesting to see how Houston pans out. They went for the jugular adding Stephon Diggs. How San Francisco pans out. They went for the jugular if they keep Debo adding Ricky Pearsall. So that should be really fun to watch as well. My number 6 quarterback, I went with Jordan Love. Who did you go
Mm.
with as your number 6 quarterback?
Yeah, this is where we're gonna start maybe differing a bit. And look, I know this guy didn't have a great year last year. Passing, the rushing TDs are stupid. Offense wasn't as sharp, but man, they go out and they add Saquon Barkley. They still got, like you said, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith. They now have Kellen Moore as their offensive coordinator. Sirianni
Mhm,
needs to get out of the way of that situation. I think Jalen Hurts has a bounce back year in 2024 after kind of a down year, and I think Jalen Hurts has the mental makeup from what he's been through and the different paths that
mhm,
he's had to take, that he will bounce back big in 2024. And obviously, you mentioned it would be nice if he had that third option, but Goddard, maybe he can stay healthy this year. The big question is going to be like Jason Kelsey's there. Is Cam
mhm,
Jurgens be able to step in, play the pivot there? They went out, they drafted Johnny Wilson, they drafted Aeneas Smith. They signed Devontae Parker. So, like, they have some guys, but you're right. It's like, and they signed Paris Campbell. I think there's enough there for Philadelphia that
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts can bounce back big in 24. So I have him as my number 6.
You know what? I didn't put Jalen Hurts in my top 10, and I'm gonna on the fly reconsider that and add him to my list because I think that was a huge, huge oversight on my part. So I'm gonna be adding him to the back half of my list. I'm gonna be knocking out my number 10, but I went with Jordan Love just because I think he's got a solid play caller in Matt LaFleur. I think he's got a really solid offensive line, which they reinvested in with their first round pick in Jordan Morgan this year. They added a bell cow running back in Josh Jacobs to take the pressure off. Not that they didn't have one before in Aaron Jones, but they're just like, hey, we're going to replace one elite running back with another elite running back. And then I think he's got a ton of selfless weapons and a really interesting offense, a selfless offense there in Green Bay with Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs and Dontavion Wicks and Christian Watson when he can stay on the field, and Musgrave and Kraft. I think he's going to build off his 2023 season. I think he's going to be even better in 2024. And that is why I went with Jordan Love as my number 6. Number 7, maybe a little out of left field for some people, but I think the disrespect for this player is real. I went with, as my number 7 quarterback, Matthew Stafford. Who did you go with as your number 7 quarterback?
We've been doing the show together for too long, baby. I have Matthew Stafford as my number 7. Look, I think Puka Nacua took the league by storm last year, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Cooper Kupp battling injury all year. He's going to hopefully come into this season healthy. They brought back they signed DeMarcus Robinson back from Baltimore.
Mm-hmm.
The combination of Stafford when he's healthy with Sean McVay has been absolutely amazing. Then they go ahead and they add Blake Corum to the mix at running back to play behind Kyron Williams or maybe to tag team. I like what they've done to kind of retool the offensive line as well. They get Jonah Jackson, Steve Avila coming into his second year, right? They got, so
Kevin Dotson.
And then they made a lot of investments in the draft on defense, right? Braden Fisk, Jared Verse, Tyler Davis on the defensive line. So not that that's really anything to do with Matthew Stafford, but I think Matthew Stafford, had he played the full season last year, and that dude's as tough as any, he could have maybe been in the mix for some chatter on the MVP. I mean, he was playing really well. And so the Rams, like, everyone wrote them off last year that they were going to be awful, but they weren't. And so I think with Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford, they earned my respect. They've obviously won a Super Bowl together. So I'm not ready to turn the page fully on Matthew Stafford's career yet. I still think he's one of the best when healthy with that receiving crew, with those running backs. He's up there for me.
Outside of Andy Reid, I think Sean McVay is probably the best just mind in football. I'm just in awe of what Sean McVay does year after year. The way they've been able to stay competitive, even though they traded all of their draft picks, right? So it'll be really interesting to see how they look in a post Aaron Donald world. But I look at this depth chart on offense and that interior offensive line of Jonah Jackson at left guard, Steve Avila at center, and Kevin Dotson at right guard. And then I look at the running backs in Kyren Williams and Blake Corum.
Yep.
With Sean McVay calling the shots,
he's gonna have a feast, man.
They're going to be able to run the ball at will. They can run whenever they want, however they want, and they are just going to gash the hell out of teams. And when the teams have to adjust to that, or the teams have to cater to that, this is where Matthew Stafford coming in at number 7 on my list shows up, because he's just gonna be living his easy breezy life, play action, Puka Nacua, play action, Cooper Kupp. You mentioned Robinson, Atwell, Tyler Higbee. They added Kobe Parkinson for the red zone as well. I don't know if the quantity is going to be there for Matthew Stafford this year, but I think the quality is going to be there. He's just going to execute, and he's going to execute at a high level because people are going to have to be so concerned with that run game. I think the Rams might be the best team in football this year. That's my hot take. My hot take is I think when all is said and done, I know they lost Aaron Donald. I know they're young on defense. I know it'll be interesting to see how the coaching situation works out on that defense. I think the Rams will have the best offense in football this year. I don't think it'll be particularly close.
That is a hot take. Maybe maybe they topple San Francisco first would be the first step in that, right? I mean, that's tough, but that is a hot take. I'll give you credit. That's up there.
Speaking of San Francisco, my number 8 quarterback is Brock Purdy. Who do you have as your number 8 quarterback?
And I made this list before the news today, by the way. So this was just coincidence, but the man who got paid today, Jared
Mhm.
Goff, is number 8 for me. Um, that dude had a really, really nice season last year. You start to think about second in the league in passing yards, just behind Tua, 67% completion percentage, 30 TDs to only 12 picks. He's got an absolute just treasure chest of weapons
Mhm.
right now with Gibbs, with Sam Laporta, with Amon-Ra, and also, by the way, emerging at the end of last season, Jameson Williams as
Mhm.
another option for him. I think Jared Goff has found his home in Detroit. The pairing with Dan Campbell, really, really impressive. I know they like to run the ball a lot, but again, that combination of Gibbs and Montgomery, Goff in the play action, especially at home in Detroit, he's obviously so, so good at home. They made
Mhm.
it all the way to that NFC Championship game last year, came up short, obviously, against the Niners. But man, it was hard. It was hard for me to leave Jared Goff off my top 10, so I have him slotted in at number 8.
Yeah, my number 8 pick, like I said, is Brock Purdy. I'm gonna get slammed for this one. I'm gonna get slammed for my number 9 as well, but sticking with Brock Purdy here, he's got Kyle Shanahan calling the shots. He's got Christian McCaffrey. He's got George Kittle. He's got Elijah Mitchell. They added Isaac Guerrero. And then we mentioned earlier in this show, like San Francisco was the first team. And this is again, if they don't trade Debo, that went for the jugular. And I respect it. You have now paired Debo with Ayuk and then Ricky Pearsall. And you also have last year's Super Bowl playoff standout like Jawan Jennings. You have Jacob Cowing. I,
Mhm.
San Francisco and Los Angeles, the Rams, like they're just going to light up scoreboards
It's
this
gonna be
year.
fun. That's gonna be a
And
fun
like,
battle this year.
oh my, both those teams are just going to, I think, light up scoreboards this year. I think they're going to be the best offenses. I think there's just so much returning for both of those teams cohesive wise that they're just going to get off to these really hot starts and just not look back.
Mm.
So again, do I think Brock Purdy is like talent wise a top 10 quarterback in the National Football League? Probably not. But I just think his statistics and what he's going to do is just going to be hard to keep him off of that list. And like, you can call him you can call him a game manager, but at the end of the day, Brock Purdy is still an unbelievably good anticipatory thrower. He's an
Mhm.
unbelievably accurate thrower. Not everybody could make the trains run on time like he could in this offense. There's a reason why he's had the success he's had. There's a reason why he's gotten to the games he's gotten to. Um, yes, he might have everything handed to him, but he's not wasting what's handed to him. He's taking full advantage of what's being handed to him.
I mean, and to be fair, right, the 49ers made a very big decision to move off of Trey Lance and kind of end that
Mhm.
experiment, right? The super high draft pick to go with Brock Purdy instead. Kyle Shanahan clearly had no issue making that decision. Well, I'm sure it was tough, but really no
Mhm.
issue saying like that's the dude, right? Brock Purdy's the guy.
Mhm.
And who knows what would have happened if he didn't get hurt, if he wasn't hurt in that game 2 years ago against the Eagles. Who knows? But yeah, he will be on my list later.
I am going to get flamed for my number 9 pick, but I'm going with a projection here. Not a guy that I am picking based on prior statistics because he has none. I'm going with Caleb Williams as my number 9 quarterback here. Who do you have as your number 9?
I like that you had Love and Williams getting a little engagement there. I think on those two picks. No, I think
I'm the
Love.
new
I mean
Chris
Love.
Sims.
I'm going. So number 9 for me, I can't leave this guy off the list. This is one where for sure I went based on mostly on talent.
Mhm.
Going to be interesting to see how this combination works. This team lost weaponry. They lost Keenan
Yeah.
Allen. They lost Mike Williams. Quentin Johnston really has to step up this year for the LA Chargers. And obviously, Justin Herbert is going to be
Mhm.
relying on Lad McConkey, the rookie, who a lot of Bills fans loved. They also drafted Brendan Rice. They signed DJ Chark. They still have Josh Palmer. And they went out and they got Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, the former running back stable of
Yeah, they got
the
Kamani.
Baltimore Ravens. Yeah, and Kamani Vidal. So Eckler's not there anymore. There
Mhm.
is going to be a lot on Justin Herbert's shoulders this year with Jim Harbaugh running that show. I do like that they invested in the offensive line. I do like that they, picked Joe Alt, Lad McConkey. I really like the first couple picks there for the Chargers this draft.
Mhm.
This pick is obviously for me more about Justin Herbert finally being able to, not that he hasn't elevated the team around him, but he has not had really any playoff experience, right? The one game they blew it against Jacksonville, right? So
Mhm.
um, this is definitely more of a pick based on talent and what he can bring and hope that he can bring to that Chargers team, because that would be just a waste. I think he's one of the most
Mhm.
talented guys in the league at the quarterback position. So he's my number 9.
Yeah, Justin Herbert is the guy that I had as my 10, and I literally put in my show notes legacy pick because he's too talented to suck,
Mhm.
even with a head coach who thinks it's 1954. I'm going to remove him for Jalen Hurts when we get to number 10, which is unfortunate. Like I said, some fan bases are going to get extremely upset. Justin Herbert's a top 5 quarterback talent wise. I think I'm just not a big buyer in what Jim Harbaugh is selling there in Los Angeles. Maybe it'd be different if the talent was different, but they're just in such a weird place roster wise. I think that's such a weird fit at head coach for where they're at roster wise. So Justin Herbert's actually going to leave my list
Hmm.
when we get to number 10 here. But Caleb Williams, we just both had CJ Stroud at number 5, and people would
Yeah.
have laughed at us if we would have
The
picked him last
supporting
year.
cast for Williams is nice. I mean,
I
it is
mean,
nice.
you have DeAndre Swift, you have Khalil Herbert, you have Roshan Johnson in the backfield. You have a solid offensive line. It's not spectacular offensive line, but it's solid. And then you have DJ Moore, Romo Dunes. You have Keenan Allen, Cole Kmet, Gerald
Hmm.
Everett. Caleb Williams wasn't my quarterback 1 in this year's draft class. Drake May was. I think Drake May's got the highest ceiling, but Drake May is going to be throwing balls to Kendrick Bourne and a bunch of rookie second, third round picks. It's Caleb Williams that's got all the fancy things around him. So he's got
Hmm.
Shane Waldron, a very experienced offensive coordinator coming from Seattle, coming out of that Sean McVay tree. So I just think Caleb Williams has got a lot going for him. I think he's a guy like Brock Purdy who's going to be handed a really good situation. And I just think he's going to take full advantage of that really good situation. Man, the Chicago Bears hit a home run with the talent they are surrounding Caleb Williams with.
They've really, I mean, usually you have to either build up the talent first and then get the
Mhm.
quarterback. Like the Chicago Bears have kind of really timed this out well to where the talent's being infused at the same time. So the
Mhm.
quarterback's coming in at the same time that the talent's there. Now Keenan Allen's probably only going to be there for he's at the probably towards the tail end of his career. But DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, Romo, this
Yep.
is a young core that this Bears team is going to build around. And DeAndre Swift is still, I think, only 25 years old. So
Mhm.
um, it's a young group overall, and then having a guy like Keenan Allen as the veteran presence, that dude was having a spectacular year last year before he kind of got hurt at the end of the season, that foot injury. But man, Keenan Allen was having a career year last year with the Chargers.
My number 10 pick is going to be Jalen Hurts. I'm going to insert him. I'm going to erase Justin Herbert. I'm going to put Jalen Hurts. Who do you have as your number 10 spot?
Yeah, I mean, and this is where you get the benefit of, hating some teams. Like, sorry, Dak, you're not on the list. Sorry, Tua, you're not on the list. Dolphins, Cowboys, I don't
Yeah.
like you too much. So for me, number 10 is Brock Purdy for all the reasons you mentioned. I think as far as the supporting cast goes and his head coach, there's not much better totality as far as the supporting cast that you're going to get in the NFL. But he's still making the throws, like you said. The anticipation is still there. McCaffrey, Ayuk, Pearsall, Kittle, Debo, right? That is special.
Mhm.
And but you still gotta execute, right? You still have to deliver, you still have to facilitate. And he did make some throws down the field. Now it's not his specialty. He's not great at throwing the ball down the field. For throwing and timing and throwing where guys can make, which by the way, the Niners, one of the highest yards after catch team in the league. They might have been the highest.
Mhm.
Someone will have to fact check me on that. Between McCaffrey after the catch, Ayuk, and Debo after the catch, he's putting the ball where it needs to be, and Shanahan's scheming it up to where it needs to be, to where those guys can maximize their talents and he can maximize Brock Purdy's strengths. So he cracks my top 10. Dolphins fans going to be pissed. Cowboys
Yeah.
fans going to be pissed, but Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so I didn't have Justin Herbert, but you did. I didn't have Jared Goff, but you did. That leaves guys like Tua not on our list. I think.
Dak's not on our list.
Yeah, Dak did not make the list. Kirk Cousins,
Rodgers.
Trevor Lawrence, Aaron Rodgers. A lot of those guys didn't make the list, and there's a lot of really good quarterbacks in the National Football League. To me, like we mentioned, guys who have just been handed everything, right? Like Tua has been handed everything but an offensive line, and I'm sorry, Miami, you've never sealed the deal in the regular season to get home field advantage, and you can't play once the temperature dips below 25 or 30 to 35 degrees. So he's the kind of guy who's put up big numbers, but he's had everything handed to him and has squandered it. So
Jordan Love was my first guy out, by the way. So I do like Jordan Love a lot.
I feel bad for Trevor Lawrence. I genuinely do. They've just surrounded him with a train wreck in his first year with Urban Meyer. And while they rebounded, and it just feels like they're spending so much money for such average talent around him. I like ATN. He's a big time player, but I mean, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley, like Evan Ingram, just such a weird assortment of talent. Not a very good offensive line in his tenure in Jacksonville. I genuinely feel bad for Trevor Lawrence.
Now he's got Gabe Davis to throw to.
Yeah, he's got Gabe Davis. Maybe he can turn it around this year. And then Kirk Cousins, it'll be really interesting to see how he comes back from the leg. And he's got a really good supporting cast in Atlanta, but a first-time play caller, but a guy out of that McVay tree in Zach Robinson. So a lot of good names. If this is the top 15 list, I think everyone will be pleased because the best quarterbacks would all be on the list, but it's not. It's a top 10 list. And that is why there will be people yelling at us in the comments section on social media. It comes with the territory of making these lists, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, look, Love doesn't make it for me. Love Tua, Dak were like my next three. And then I had another, like the next tier below that for me was Caleb, Rodgers, Lawrence, and Cousins, were the next ones below that. So yeah, I mean, it shows you like a top 15 list, maybe pretty easy to make. A top 10 list, not so easy to make. You're going to have to leave some people out.
Before we get out of here, this show is brought to you by Picasso's Pizza, 4 great locations in Williamsville, West Seneca, Lancaster, and Blaisdell. Buffalo Pizza since 1980. You can order online at picassospizza.net. And if you're an out-of-towner like us, you can even get it mailed to your home. We can tell you from experience, it's just as good as getting it fresh from the restaurant. Again, that is picassospizza.net. What's on the docket for us, Dave? Next Monday, we'll be tiering the Buffalo Bills opponents. We'll have the schedule in our hands. We'll be able to see who we play off a bye week, who has a bye week when we're playing them, how many road games we have in a row, how many home games all those various different things that sort of factor into the equation. And we'll be tiering the opponents the Buffalo Bills have to play next season by sort of order of or tiers of how competitive the games will be. Maybe make a really very, very early record prediction. But of course,
factoring in the schedule, of course.
Yeah, fun exercise, but it will be all for naught because once the regular season hits, things change drastically with injuries and all the other various different factors. So it'll be a fun exercise, but hardly a concrete one next week as we tier the Buffalo Bills opponents. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. Like and subscribe. We are also a podcast. So if you don't want to watch us on YouTube, you can go to any major podcasting platform, type out Air Raid Buffalo Football, and you can find this show. This Thursday, 9 p.m. show, since it is pre-recorded, is actually available to you Thursday morning via podcast, audio only. So if you want to listen to us a little bit early, you can do so. Thursday mornings, you can listen to what you just listened to here or watched here on YouTube. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. And until next time, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Thank you for watching tonight's episode of the Air Raid Hour. Make sure to hit that like button on the way out. If you are catching the show on demand, leave a reply in the comments section and we will respond over the course of the week. You can always listen to every episode next day on all major podcasting platforms, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify by searching Air Raid Buffalo. Thank you for your continued support, and as always, go Bills!